my name is Marla. Welcome to a video teaching going along with the Names of God Bible study. You can join this study by going to injesusname.net, subscribe, it's free, and you'll get the videos and the written teachings sent directly to you. Each one of the teachings is on a different name of God, and the last one I did was in writing, and it was on the name of God, Man of Sorrows. And what we found is that Jesus was tied to this name, Man of Sorrows, even though it's from an Old Testament verse. And he was a man of sorrows because as the creator of all humanity coming to earth to save, there was just a sadness in him knowing that many people would not believe and therefore would not be saved into heaven with he and his Father. So that's where Jesus was known as a man of sorrows. And so today I wanted to teach a little bit more about Jesus as the creator of humanity, the creator of everything. And I chose that because it's a sticky point for some people, many people, to see Jesus as the one that created us, that created everything. They might not have a problem with God or even God the Father being the creator of everything, but as far as Jesus, it's harder. And I want to tell you why that is, especially at Jesus's time, but even now into today. When Jesus came to earth, he came for the Jewish people, and the Jewish people believe in something called the Shema. It's a prayer, and it's a commandment to say this prayer in both morning and nightly prayer. It is a centerpiece of their prayer life. And so the Shema states that God is one. And so for the people of Jesus's time, when he came, to hear that Jesus was saying that he was God, that went against what they believed. And also today, the same thing. The Jewish people believe in a monotheistic God. They believe that God is one because of this thing called the Shema. Now, I'm going to read that for you in a second. But I just want to say out loud that Christians, Christ followers, also believe in a monotheistic God. We just believe that God is one in a different way, that God is three in one, and that is what people know as the Trinity. Now, I am not going to try to put out for you a metaphor or a word picture or anything to try to explain the Trinity because it's a God concept, and so I'm not going to try to explain it. But just know that Christians believe the same as Jewish people, that God is one. But when we read the Shema, you're going to see the difference in what we believe. Now, I'm going to say also that Jesus very clearly believed that he was one with the Father. He said it. So I'm going to read for you first, before the Shema, Jesus' own words about himself. And this is from John 14:9. Jesus says, he's talking to Philip here, one of the disciples. Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" So Jesus is saying very clearly that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Not if you've seen what I do or you've seen how I act. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And so Jesus says, me and the Father, we're one. If you're looking for God, the Spirit, you can just look at me and you're going to see him. That's Jesus talking. Now, John, who wrote the book of John, one of the disciples, one of the apostles, he wrote this very, very clearly in verse 1 of chapter 1 of John. So let's read that. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him, not anything was made that was made." So very clearly you can see that John, who knew Jesus well, said that Jesus was with God, was God, and he created everything. So Jesus was the creator. No bones about it in the New Testament. But now let's go back to the Shema and see the verses where the problem lies. Now, the Shema is a blending of a bunch of different verses from Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 5, Deuteronomy 11, 13 through 21, and Numbers 15, 37 through 41. But I'm just going to read from Deuteronomy, and you're going to get the gist, because all three of the verses, those sections, all basically say this same thing. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Very familiar to Christians, obviously very familiar to Jewish people. This is the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Now, the Lord is one. That is where they get their monotheistic picture of God. That God is one, and so he can't be many. Now, I wanna highlight this for you because it's important. People will say that this was written so that God could be separated out from the pagans who followed gods, many gods. And so that's why they would say that it was so clearly written in Deuteronomy and other places that the Lord your God is one. Now, that may be true, but the fact of the matter is, if the writer wanted to say that, he could have said, there's only one God. And that's not what he's saying here. The writer, who's Moses, is saying the Lord is one. And the word that he's using here for one is a Hebrew word, echad, E-C-H-A-D. And the word most better can be described as oneness. The Lord your God is oneness. So he's not saying the Lord is absolute one. He's saying oneness. There is another word for absolute one, which we're going to talk about. But this word, eshad, means oneness. So if you think about it, why would anybody have to say that, right? I would not have to say to you, Marla is one person. I mean, that is weird, right? Nobody would have to say when describing me, oh, Marla is one person. That's odd. Unless I was schizophrenic or a clone, there's only one me. I don't have to repeat that. So this leads, if you just think about it, it just lends itself to knowing that this Shema is coming out of having to explain that the Lord is oneness, because there's other places in the Old Testament that show him to be many, more than one, together. So follow with me. This word eshad is used specifically to show that the Lord is oneness, because there's places in the Bible that show him as more than one. All right, now I'm going to show you some of those places, and there are many, but let's go into oneness to show the plurality of God. I'll just pick a couple. Genesis 2:24 is a good one, because people know this verse. Therefore, man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That one flesh word is eshad, oneness. Two becoming one, right? The man and the woman are not one, but they become oneness in flesh. That's the word eshad. Another place, let's look at Exodus 24:3. I'm going to be flipping around a lot, so just please be patient with me and stick with me, because this is important teaching. So Exodus 24:3 says, Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and the rules. And the people answered with one voice and said, all the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do. So the people came together with one voice. Obviously, there were many, many voices, but eshad voice, one voice, many becoming one. That's the word eshad, oneness. Let me show you one other one. How about we'll go to something out of the Torah, the first 5 books. So this is somebody other than Moses writing and using the same word. Ezra 2:64 says, the whole assembly together was 42,360. So Ezra is numbering the people, and he's saying the whole assembly together was this number. So the eshad assembly, it's a bunch of people coming together as oneness. That's the word eshad. Now, if the writer, Moses, would have wanted to write singular one, there was a whole different word for that. So if he wanted to write that in the Shema, he would have used the word yashid. That's Y-A-C-H-I-D. That's absolute oneness. And so there are examples in the Old Testament of this word being used by Moses in another context. So let's look at Genesis 22:2, and we'll see absolute oneness used. So this is in the sacrifice, Abram sacrificing Isaac. This verse points to that. He said, this is God said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. The word yashid there is take your son, your only, your absolute one son. That's the word yashid. So you can see Moses, he knows both words, and when he wants to say absolute one, he uses yashid, where in the Deuteronomy verses for the Shema, it's not used. Let's look at another one. Let's look at a psalm, all right? So obviously another writer, probably David, used the word yashid as absolute one and chose that word specifically for a reason. So Psalm 22:20 says, 22:20, deliver my soul from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dog. The word yashid there is my precious life. It means my only life, my absolute only life. That is the word yashid. Now one last one, and a very important one. I want you to turn to Zechariah. So in the book of Zechariah, we have another use of the word yashid. Now it's important because this is a messianic prophecy verse, and you're going to hear it, but look for the word yashid in it. Zechariah 12:10. And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and pleas for mercy, so that when they look on me, on him who they have pierced, they shall mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and weep bitterly over him as one weeps after a firstborn. So where is yashid? As one weeps over an only, as one mourns for an only child, an absolute only child. That's the word yashid. And so beautifully you can see that this word, only son, only child, is used in a prophetic verse from the Old Testament that points right to Jesus being pierced as the Messiah. So point being, the Shema is using a word that shows oneness, but not an absolute oneness, a plurality of oneness. It's a very specific word meant to show us that the Lord is oneness, a coming together of many into one, three persons in one. And that's why we as Christians can say we believe in the Shema. We believe in the monotheistic nature of God. We just believe in the word that was used for one as oneness, because it is the word. So God himself did not hold back on talking to himself as a plurality, as the creator. And we can see this from the very beginning verse of the Bible. We can see this in Genesis 1:1. So Genesis 1:1 states, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, I say that God is not holding back on calling himself many, because the word for God right there is Elohim. So there are many, many different Hebrew words for God, but the main one is El, E-L. That word can be pluralized into Elohim, and that is the word used right here. In the beginning, God, Elohim, created the heavens and the earth. So that's the male plural version of El. Elohim, God, the word for God is used in the Old Testament 2,845 times. Of those times, 2,607 of those times, Elohim is used, the male plural version of God. So this word Elohim means gods. Not many gods, but that they're the oneness of gods. I want to show you a verse where this word Elohim is used for gods, and you can see it how it is used in a context that'll show you its meaning. So go to Exodus 20, another very important verse for you to have in mind if you're talking to people about the Trinity and God being more than one person, three in one. So Exodus 20, 2 through 3 is the verse to go to for this. You shall have no other gods before me. Sorry, I am in the wrong verse. Exodus 20. Oh, sorry, I'm in the right verse. I just read the wrong thing. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. So that's Exodus verses 2 through 3. I am the Lord your God, that's Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Same word. You shall have no other Elohim for me. And you can see in the text that that's a little g. So no other gods, meaning no other of the many, many pagan gods. You'll only have me, the Lord your gods, Elohim. Same word. So that word Elohim means gods, and God is using it from verse 1:1 of Genesis to talk about himself. God also uses the word us for himself in Genesis and other places. So let's look at Genesis 1:26, and you're going to see that God himself does not hold back calling himself an us. So Genesis 1:26 says, oh, sorry, wrong page. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish and the sea and the birds and the heavens and the livestock and over the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on earth. So God calls himself an us and an our. He does it again in Genesis 3:22. This is in context of, let's see. This is after the fall of man. God says, then the Lord said, behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. And he goes on. So God says that Adam and Eve have become like us. He doesn't say like me. And then let's go to Genesis 11:7, and we'll see it again. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. This is God saying when the people are building the Tower of Babel, he says, let us come down and confuse their speech so they can't all have one language and keep building this tower to the heavens. So God does not hold back calling himself an us. We can also see one of the prophets who was a mouthpiece of God using this same language. So let's go to Isaiah 6:8. And we'll see it again. Isaiah 6:8. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And whom shall go for us? Then I said, here I am, send me. And he said, go and say to the people. So God is saying, who shall go for us to Isaiah? And Isaiah says, here am I. So God calls himself an us all through the Old Testament. So it should be absolutely nothing, no surprise to anybody when Jesus comes in the New Testament saying that he is the same as the Father. And it should also be no problem with anybody recognizing that Jesus was then the Creator, because God doesn't hold back on it. He's called Elohim throughout the Old Testament, and Jesus calls himself one with the Father in many different ways in the New Testament, and it all then ties back to the Shema. You know, let's just realize that word for one, it could have been absolute one, but it wasn't used. It was used for oneness. And so for your Jewish friends, for your Jehovah's Witness friends, you can use all this and tell them that yes, God is oneness. And this is why I, as a Christian, believe it, and this is all the different places I see it. Believe me, there's many, many other verses that I could point you to that show the Trinitarian nature of God in the Old Testament, but this just gives you a little bit of a background, and this hopefully will help you to be able to put it right in your mind and be able to share it with others that yes, we believe that God is one. Christians believe that, and Jesus is the creator. All right. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.